Are you reading a book right now? In which chapter are you? Do you remember that one thing that happened in chapter 2 that you forgot to mention? Are you gonna bring it back? Probably your readers don't remember either. It's okay. I'm here to help you. My name is Beatrice, and I am here with 10 tips to avoid getting lost in your own plot, because if you forget, your readers will forget too. Guaranteed. I speak from experience. Also stick around for tip number 10, because that's something that a lot of authors overlook and can really make the difference on delivering promises or just leaving your readers completely confused. Tip number 1, define the promise. Long-term plot threads don't have to always be a mystery, but they definitely are always a promise. If you mention something, especially in early chapters, and you give it a lot of explanation or a lot of detail, your readers are going to start wondering about that one thing, because they are going to read your intentionality behind that. They're going to think, this is definitely a detail that I have to keep with myself, keep in my pocket for the future. Is like in the video game Life is Strange, that you have the little sound that says this action will have consequences. What are the details that you are putting in your story that are telling your readers that they have to remember that? What are the promises that you're doing early on that maybe you're not noticing that will stay in your readers' brains? And take note. A good tip is to go over the first half of the book, especially if you're like doing editing, and try to see it from the perspective of a reader, and try to check all of those things that catch your attention that maybe you couldn't have seen as an author. Those are the details that the readers are going to be lingering on, and those are the ones that you could use to your advantage. Tip number 2, make it personal, make it hurt. Emotional stakes are what keeps people invested. If you are trying to promise something and make a delivery that is very impactful to your readers, you have to make it impactful to the story, particularly to the characters. Usually when we read, we get emotionally invested with the characters, with the setting, with the entire plot, with the entire story. If you don't give it emotional stakes, if you don't make it feel personal, your readers are not going to be as impacted for those big reveals. So every time that you already defined the promise. Every time that you are going to make that promise, think about it. How does this affect the characters that it involves? How does it affect the environment? What are the emotions that the thing would bring if it happens and if it doesn't? What would be all the outcomes that it would bring? And then how can that change the story, and how can that change the lives of the characters that are involved in it? Tip number 3, keep a tracker. And I kind of hinted at this from the beginning, but all of these things are kind of intermeshed together. That's another tip, actually. But definitely write it down. If you are at an early stage of writing, you can 100%, this is going to be super beneficial to you. Keep a tracker of all the things that you're promising, all the questions that you're raising. I really like Google Sheets, so like I have a sheet and it's just divided in columns, and every time touching on a subject or putting on one of those details that is this action might have consequences, I just jot it down. Even if I don't know how I'm going to resolve it just yet, it's very important that you keep a tracker of every promise and every plot thread that you're opening, to make sure that you are able to fulfill that promise before the ending of the book, and you're not leaving your readers feel completely unsatisfied. If you're going to do a table, I recommend you to put the columns of when that happened. It can be when at a point in the story or just in which chapter, so you can have a reference who this is affecting, where it happens, especially if you are working on a story that has multiple settings, how this is resolved, if you know, and if not, just fill it out whenever you resolve it or whenever you get the idea on how to resolve it. And then what is the emotional weight that takes. And I promise you, this is going to be a lifesaver for you, because remembering things is hard. Tip number 4: echo. If a moment disappears, it will be forgotten by your audience. If you just mention one of the specific details we were talking about in chapter number 2, and then you realize that that blanket was important because it was the weapon with which person number 3 was murdered, but you only touch upon the blanket in chapter 45, people are going to forget that the blanket existed. So you have to make sure that you're keeping an echo of those little details and remind your readers that these are things that they have to keep in mind through the story, so that way whenever the time to fulfill the promise arrives, they don't feel like taken aback, like, oh my god, what is this person talking about, and they don't completely forget about it. Bring it back very, very strategically, and it doesn't have to be a very big build-up. It can just be a glance at something that maybe exists, the blanket that exists within your main character's room, and it's important for some reason, but they're not saying the reason just yet. It could be a phrase, it could be an interruption. Someone is going to confess something very important, and then something happens in the middle of it, and it keeps your readers wanting to know what happened and why does this person keep being interrupted, and it builds up the moment, so that way whenever you fulfill it, it's way more satisfying. Tip number 5: write the payoff first. You don't have to write in chronological order. Our brains work that way because, I don't know, we live in the 4th dimension, and the dimension is time and all of that, and it kind of makes sense in our heads at first. But you have to realize that you have control of your world because you're an author. So if you have a very specific idea of how you want the promise to be fulfilled, you can just write that scene, or at least keep some notes of the details that you know you want to include whenever that big reveal is done, and you can just work your way towards it. If you already know how that payoff is going to look in the end, it's going to be way more easy for you to build all the details that are bringing you to that payoff, so you are making the right promises to your readers and they feel satisfied in the end. Tip number 6: everything is interconnected. You don't have to fulfill each promise independently. Each plot thread doesn't have to be completely separate from the other one. One of my favorite books that I have read recently is What Moves the Dead by Ursula Vernon, and I will not give big spoilers, but if you haven't read the book, you should read it. But there are details mentioned along the book that seem important, but at the same time, you don't see how they could be connected. And something is happening with the lake. The animals are acting weird. The family that lives in the house is going through something. I'm trying to be vague to not reveal the plot twists of the book. But all of a sudden, you start seeing as the plot develops that things are interconnected. They are related within each other because the animals are drinking the water that is in the lake, but what happened several years ago with someone else from another family, and it realizes, and at the end you realize that everything makes sense because everything is connected, and you're like, whoa! And that is how you build good payoff. Tip number 7. Structure is your friend. I might be biased because I really like outlining, but I think it's true. If you keep some sort of structure specifically on how you are presenting your plot threads, it's going to help a lot with your pacing. And this is from someone that has a lot of pacing issues, that has been working on them a lot, and I've learned a thing or two about it. I personally like to color code in my little outline each chapter that touches upon each plot thread, just to make sure that I am not losing one for too long. It really helps you, it helps you have a visual understanding on how everything is threading within the story. Let's say that you have purple, pink, and green, and you see that the chunks of chapters of scene, they are purple, green, 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 purple, green, green, pink, green, green, purple, 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 green, and you don't mention the pink again. You can know that it will be a good moment to bring back whatever pink is. And that will make pacing feel way more gratifying for your readers. Tip number 8, rule of threes. Or at least start with a rule of threes. I believe that this should be a minimum. Introducing the plot thread, mentioning it one time, and then just creating the payoff. If you want to build up the moment, you need to make sure that you are not just introducing it and then fulfilling the promise immediately after, because you want to build that tension, you want to build that moment. And a very good writing exercise to you would be thinking about a detail, thinking about a plot thread that you want to work on or you're working on in your book, and seeing what the beginning and the end of it is, and then thinking about one specific moment that you could mention it to remind your readers and kind of build that tension. And then you can play with that rule of threes. Maybe you make a rule of fours, a rule of fives, depending on the length of the thread, depending on the length of your book, and depending on the pacing that you are giving to your story. And that rule can also help set the right expectations for your readers. If you are mentioning something and then you mention it again and then it closes, and then you mention another thing and then you mention it again and then it closes, it gives them a sense of satisfaction whenever they start noticing the pattern. But you can do something that's even cooler, which is give them like a fake ground and giving them a sense of them knowing what's up, thinking that they know what's up, so they can be like, oh yeah, they mentioned this thing already once, so this thing is going to probably close the next time that this plot thread is mentioned. And then you don't do it and you make them wait, and then you shake the ground below them and they're like, oh my god, I really, really want to know what's going to happen next. And that's how you get them. So yeah, set up expectations and then just subvert them. But you have to know how to do them, so you have to practice. Good exercise though. Tip number 9. Threads can be unresolved. That is fine. You don't have to wrap everything with a perfect little bow. However, it has to have a purpose, has to have a reason. If you don't have a reason, then your readers are going to be upset because they wanted the thing to be resolved. So it really, really has to be intentional, and you have to make it very clear that it's not because you forgot, but it's because like in life, some things are just left unresolved, unfortunately. It's basically what a good open ending would be, that it leaves your readers thinking about what could have happened and having certain ideas, but kind of I wish I would have known, but at the same time, I am very happy that I don't know. This happens to be particularly great for thrillers and mysteries and that stuff that I really love. But it can be in any genre. And yeah, definitely you don't want to break the promise. If you are touching upon a plot thread and you are promising through your story that this is going to be resolved, and then you don't give it a good reason to not be resolved, then your readers are going to be upset and you don't want to make them upset. Tip number 10, my favorite one, is hiding in plain sight. Hide your setup in ways that feel mundane or just part of everyday life and just part of just whatever is normal for your characters or for your setting, and then make sure that you're adding enough details so in hindsight it seems absolutely inevitable, but those details don't seem to be interconnected. A very good example of this, and this is going to have to be a spoiler, is in American Horror Story Murder House. There is something that happens with one of the characters. I'm going to spoil my favorite plot twist from American Horror Story Murder House, so if you don't want to be spoiled, I will put the specific time that you can just jump to. In that season, the first season of American Horror Story, we follow Violet and her relationship with Tate and her relationship with her entire family, honestly. And we can see how she's not adapting in school and how miserable she is. We can also see how her relationship with Tate is growing. You see from the very beginning that she is very depressed and she doesn't want to continue existing. And multiple times that is mentioned, and multiple times she tries to stop her existence or thinks about that. In a couple opportunities, she acts upon it, and in one of them, she is saved by Tate. Almost at the end of the season, I believe, you find out, and after that happens, Violet becomes more depressed, more attached to Tate. Her relationship with her parents becomes way worse, and she stops going to school up to the point that her parents confront her. Almost towards the end of the season, when she tries to leave the house to visit her mom, you realize how all of those details that seem just like part of day-to-day life of Violet are connected to the fact that she actually had succeeded in her unaliving attempt, and it sheds some different light in certain attitudes that Tate had whenever he was saying things like, oh, you shouldn't go to school and stuff like that, because within that world, ghosts can't exit the house, and if she tried to exit the house, she would have realized that she is no longer alive. That is a very, very good example to me of how you are hiding this very big reveal in very small details that seem just like mundane things that are part of life. Remember, plot threads are the veins of your story. They pumped out the blood, the emotion, the life that is going to come from your story to your readers, and it's going to be what is going to help them be attached to it and invested in it. They build out the tension, the emotion. So I really, really hope that you liked these tips and that they help you build your wonderful stories and make them even better. Tell me which one hit you the hardest. Did you know all of them, or are some of them new to you? What has been your favorite payoff in media? I mentioned 2 of my favorites, but I really wanted to know yours. If you like this type of content, you would absolutely love our podcast. Is going to be in this YouTube channel as well. On it, we talk about anything and everything about small business, about writing, about stories, and about the publishing industry. For more tips like this, follow us and visit StoryForge.com, an online writing and reading community in which you can also share your stories, find your community, and discover great hidden gems that can become your next favorite reads. See you soon.